I want to ask a few questions for Pastor Bill. We've been discussing over the years a lot of doctrinal issues that I think have been very important, that have helped shape my philosophy of thinking and my ministry. But I know that some of the insights that Bill has will be a blessing to our church and to anyone else who might happen to have a chance to listen to this. So Bill, some of the questions that you and I have discussed over the years that have really been helpful for me in formulating my philosophy of ministry and my view of Christianity and my worldview certainly centers around the doctrines of grace. And, you know, one of the questions I want to ask is, can you today preach the gospel if you're not preaching the doctrines of grace? What would you say about that?
Well, I think you have to narrow in on the gospel. First of all, the gospel is essentially the person and work of Christ. Total depravity, for example, is not the gospel. But not to believe in total depravity or total inability has a great deal of effect on how we present Christ and how we invite people to come to Christ. So it will have an impact in that area. There are those who don't embrace the doctrines of grace who may more centrally set forth the person and work of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so we would say to that degree they are preaching the gospel. But we certainly are not surrounding the gospel with these other great essential doctrines. And that makes a huge difference. And so in one sense, yes. In another sense, no. The doctrines of grace especially set forth in clarity the person and work of Christ without distraction. Mm-hmm. Without that, then we're into things that are not biblical and does not help us. So total depravity is not the gospel. Effectual calling narrowly of itself is not the gospel. It is the person and work of Christ. So a person could preach the person and work of Christ, but they are going to influence how people view the gospel.
How important would you say the doctrines of grace would be in the life of any local church?
Well, I would say it would be very important. It's the doctrine of soteriology, the doctrine of salvation, and really what it gets down to is our view of God and of man and of salvation regarding the doctrines of grace. And if we don't have a full understanding, we're going to miss something with the doctrine of God, the doctrine of man, and the doctrine of salvation.
One final question. You know, over the years, you and I have discussed Calvinism and the doctrines of grace, mm-hmm. Reformed theology, are different ways that we've, kind of framed it. We've actually kind of come to the conclusion that Calvinism it is a worldview, and it shapes your whole. Correct. It's a lens through which you view everything. Can you kind of explain a little bit what we mean when we say that? How Reformed theology or Calvinism is like a lens through which we filter everything through. What does that mean to you?
That's a very good point, Pastor. One of the ways to approach it is if you go to most dictionaries of philosophy, so not necessarily Christian philosophy, but just general dictionaries of philosophy. If you look under A, almost never will you find Arminianism there. But if you look under C, you will find Calvinism. Why is that so? That even unbelieving philosophers recognize that there are worldwide implications mm-hmm. for Calvinism or mm-hmm. Reformed theology. And so they recognize it as a great power that has to be dealt with. And so it includes salvation, but it also is all-embracing of all reality. It unleashes the Word of God to cover all areas, and that God is sovereign over all areas of life and thought.
That's great. At Berean Baptist, what we really try to do is proclaim these great historic reformational truths without apology. And to me, that's been the hallmark of my ministry, proclaiming justification by faith and preaching these great truths that have been owned by God through the years to bring great blessing to the Western world especially. But anyway, that's what I want to see happen in our church as we continue to move forward in the years to come, that we will be a church that keeps our focus on Christ, on the gospel of justification, but within the framework of Reformed theology. I hope this is a blessing, and we're going to have other interviews from Bill and other folks in our church and other guests in the days to come. Thank you.